Welcome to a Legendarium special about how Washington Irving helped to invent Christmas as we know it today. Thanks to the legend of Sleepy Hollow, a story about a school teacher who vanishes in the woods of upstate New York, Washington Irving is best known to modern readers as a writer of scary stories. However, Irving wrote much more about Yuletide, so much that some credit him with creating Christmas in the United States as we know it. Of course, Washington Irving did not invent the holiday, but he did everything he could to transform minor customs celebrated in upstate New York into national celebrations. Like Charles Dickens, he also sought to make the holiday one of family and social togetherness. Washington Irving was born on April 3, 1783 in New York City. The youngest of 11 children, his Scottish immigrant parents named him after George Washington, the hero of the just-completed American Revolution. Young Irving even attended the presidential inauguration of his namesake in 1789. Later, he wrote an account of the first inauguration in his book Life of Washington, and likely invented the story of Washington adding, "So help me God," to his oath of office. It is worth noting that Washington Irving grew up in a country where most people did not celebrate Christmas. The strict Protestants who settled New England and some of the Middle Atlantic states saw Christmas as too Catholic. And after the American Revolution, more and more people saw Christmas as a British holiday which no patriotic American should celebrate. In fact, the newly convened U.S. Congress showed its contempt for the British holiday by meeting on Christmas Day 1789 and continued to do so for a half-century. Educated in several private academies, Irving began writing essays under the pen name Jonathan Oldstyle for the Morning Chronicle, a paper edited by his older brother Peter. After touring Europe from 1804 to 1806, Washington Irving returned to New York City to practice law. Unfortunately, by his own admission, Irving proved a poor student, and in 1806 he barely passed the bar. Preferring to indulge his creative side, Irving teamed up with his friend James Kirk Paulding and his oldest brother William to publish Salmagundi, a magazine of humorous essays. At the age of 26 in 1809, Washington Irving published A History of New York from the beginning of the world to the end of the Dutch dynasty. Irving imagined the book as a parody of Samuel L. Mitchell's The Picture of New York, a travelogue through the United States' leading trade hub. Mitchell, a Columbia medical professor and a U.S. senator, acted as if he knew everything about everything, and Irving took great delight in mocking Mitchell's know-it-all sensibility. In his book, Irving passed off several tall tales as factual histories. Among Irving's yarns, he told a story about the shipwreck of a Dutch scouting party on Manhattan. On the shore, one of its members received a vision in which Saint Nicholas appeared among them, riding over the treetops in a wagon that he used to bring his yearly presents to the children. St. Nicholas then told the Dutch to settle on the island, blowing puffs of smoke from his pipe, which morphed into the forms of the great buildings that would eventually fill the streets of New York. Irving's tale effectively made St. Nicholas the founding father of the most famous city in America. And Irving almost certainly took the character of St. Nicholas from Sinterklaas, a Santa Claus-like figure popular among the Dutch who lived in the Hudson Valley north of New York City. Sinterklaas is inspired by the Catholic bishops who ruled the Dutch until their revolution in the 17th century. Sinterklaas wears a bishop's headdress and carries a shepherd's staff. And in a reminder of the long Dutch war against Spain, Sinterklaas doesn't just give naughty boys and girls coal in their stocking, he throws them in a sack and takes them to Spain, where they will spend the rest of the year. Dutch in the United States and Europe celebrated Christmas with spiced cookies, ginger nuts, and honey-flavored pastries. Irving hoped that the whole country would eventually be able to celebrate such revels, though he left the United States for Europe in 1815, only returning home in 1832. The year of his return, Washington Irving published the Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon, which is most famous for including the short story The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Yet it also included 4 essays on a holiday that Washington Irving saw very little of in his home country, but could not get enough of in merry old England, namely Christmas. In 4 essays within the sketchbook, Washington Irving wrote fondly of English Christmases. He described their dinners and dancing and singing, their decorations and blazing fires, and their air of good cheer. One of the short stories, Bilderback Hall, told of an English squire who welcomed his tenants into his manor house and served them a sumptuous feast. Irving's enthusiasm for the holiday struck a chord with his countrymen, and Americans embraced Irving's vision of Christmas as their own, marking the revival of a holiday that had been banned in some parts of the United States as late as 1830. And ultimately, Santa Claus, first described by Washington Irving, would become far more fleshed out. At various times, Santa Claus would be portrayed as a pagan sorcerer, other times as a fearsome gnome, and sometimes as a drunkard pulled about in a chariot by a team of turkeys. It would ultimately fall to Thomas Nast in the 1860s, who modeled Santa Claus upon a Gilded Age robber baron, fat and bearded and warmly dressed, but instead of stealing from the poor and giving to himself, this version of Santa Claus would give freely to everybody. And in this way, Washington Irving and Thomas Nast helped to invent Christmas as we know it in the United States. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.